So I'm sorry you all had to look at my face while her amazing projects were being introduced. But we'll start with me and then move to Elizabeth and perhaps treat it like a round table once we're all finished. So again, my name is Michaela. I'm going to talk a little bit about using digital scholarship in the classroom. This is going to piggyback a bit on what Yo Morimoto talked about, and also fits in quite well with Alexander's work on Omeka this afternoon. So in the interest of time, and because it's not relevant right now, we're not going to look at the EAIC. I will assume that you all will look it up online later. But just know that that forms the basis and foundation for what I will be talking about. After crossing this out, we're left with digital object use, sort of the challenges and rewards in the classroom. Then we're going to talk about student interactions with digital materials a little bit. And then I'd like to offer a really fun, recent example of working with some of the digital objects at Lafayette with some students. Skipping this slide. Okay, so first, when we all talk about archives, I think we all have a certain understanding of what we're talking about. But what I've been noticing in the classroom is that students, even several weeks into a class dealing with archives, don't quite understand the distinction between an online digital archive of images and Google Images. So this is a distinction that we have to be able to make for our students. I just witnessed a couple of weeks ago a student being given the task of pulling an image from an archive online. He went straight to Google, picked an image that had no metadata, and uploaded it to an Omeka exhibition. No good. So we had to stop, reset. But I think this is something to be aware of when you're working with especially undergraduate students, that the concept of an archive for students who have grown up not with analog archives at all, growing up with technology at their fingertips, this is not always clear to them. I think also one of the important things, using digital technologies in the classroom sort of magnify pedagogical issues. Instructors, if you're disorganized in regular life, that's fine. You know, you can talk all you want and students just tune out and whatever. But if you're doing the same thing in the classroom and expecting students to follow along with a digital technology, but you're not giving instructions, or you're way ahead and they're still way behind, you know, these things start to really pull apart students' abilities to interact with the project, and can really drag a syllabus back, way back. Also, digital projects take a lot of time. They take students' time outside of the classroom, and they take a lot of time in the classroom. I think when Alexander was talking, and maybe Elizabeth, if I'm wrong about this, please correct me, was talking about the class she does, the sort of first year seminar. It's a digital humanities themed class. But when you're working with digital humanities projects for an anthropology class or a literature class, you've got a lot of other content that has to be covered for that discipline. And on top of that, you're adding a really labor-intensive side project, or integrated project, but nonetheless, not sort of ancillary to the main theme of the course. So it's just something to be aware of. And today we talked about Omeka, fortunately, so I'm not going to go into any of it. But Alexander mentioned the ambiguity, sort of the blessing and the curse of the ambiguity of Dublin Core. When you look at Omeka's website, they offer definitions for the Dublin Core metadata fields. Super ambiguous. For example, again, a couple of weeks ago in the classroom, the students were given a fabulous worksheet designed by one of my colleagues, and were asked to read these through and then one image, upload it, and give it metadata. And we had limited the metadata fields they had to fill in, but one of the fields that they were expected to add was contributor. So if we look at this, contributor is defined as an entity responsible for making contributions to the resource. Examples: person who contributed a story or file for an Omeka collecting project, owner or donor of collected objects. Okay, I will tell you what happened. Cut to the punchline. Half the students immediately put their own names because they're the ones who are uploading it to the Omeka project. So some fundamental assumptions that we may have about metadata, just they can't be considered fundamental when you're dealing with students. So I just wanted to sort of let that out into the ether and have you thinking about some of the ways that students need extra guidance when they're working with even a fairly straightforward digital project. Okay, so I hope you all can sort of see that these are two scrolls with the Japanese imperial lineage. They both were donated to Lafayette College by one of our MVP donors, Richard Mamana. And they have two different formats. I guess I'll describe them as we go along. About a month or two ago, I finally got to the processing stage for this and was helping our cataloger figure out what to do with these objects. And as part of that, I unrolled it. This particular scroll is over 470 centimeters long, so it's about 15 feet long. You can imagine this is not something that we can bring into the classroom. We haven't even really figured out a good way to scan it yet. We used some photo stitching and took pictures along the way, but that's the best so far that we've got. So that's one of the scrolls that we have. The second is this one. And this was published in 1935, so it has up to the Showa emperor, who is not yet Showa at that point. It's about 5 feet long, roughly. And I just want to point out while we're here, this fairly clear red line up the center. That will become critical in the rest of this story. So, working with a student, assistant, to sort of process these scrolls. This also is from the early 1940s, published in the early 1940s. And as you can see, we have, sorry, I'm not sure if you can see this. We have the sort of gods and goddesses pantheon up here. And then we have this little break right here. And then we start with Humanities from here on down. So sorry. Here's our break. Gods and goddesses and fine. We would all expect to see this. Let's go back to 1935 scroll. This red line has no clear break. And the student I was working with, of course, starts at the bottom and is looking at the names that she knows. She knows Meiji Tenno. She knows Taisho Tenno. These are people she knows. So she starts at the bottom and she's working her way up, and then she misses, several thousand years. She doesn't know anybody. And then she gets to Jinmu Tenno and she's like, there's Jinmu Tenno. And then she keeps going up and she's like, oh, Amaterasu. And she said to me, so, are they real people too? Whoa. Of course I had to say, what do you think? I can't answer that question. And she said, well, these people at the bottom, I know, and they, there's no break, and I think they must have been real people. And I said, okay, so, what do you know about Amaterasu? So then we talk through some of the myths, and we get to, we're on Wikipedia, we're looking at Amaterasu and her husband, brother. And she hears this, he's the brother and he's also the husband, and she's like, oh, so they're not real people. And I'm like, I don't know. Do you think so? And then we went to the place on the scroll where the provenance is sort of in the printer's information and the date. And we look at it and it's 1935. And I said, so this is 1935. What do you think, given she had been shown pictures of the 15-foot long scroll, why do you think this may have been represented as one long line with no breaks? Because you've already seen the other scroll that has a break. So I don't know. I don't know. So then we get into issues of the Humanities Declaration at the end of the war. And we listen to it on YouTube and we read the transcript. And she's never heard of this. She's never heard that the emperor was asked to say he was not a god. So fortunately then I brought in one of my own sort of pet project pieces. This is not part of Lafayette's collection. This is a diary entry written by a person that I know in Japan, written on January 1st in 1946, and I gave the student the English translation. And you can see that there's this highlighted section in which the diarist says, "At night, listening to the radio, I learned of the passing of an imperial decree. The emperor said himself that he was not a god." So my anthropological, historian-ish disciplinary self is just jumping for joy with these connections that are made possible by pulling in, this terrible, scan of a scan right now, of this diary entry and the English translation, these amazing scrolls, Wikipedia, pulling from all of these sources that just would not be possible without digitization in the digital realm. So coming to the end here, just again some final takeaways. Digital projects, I have 3 minutes. Digital projects require more preparation time for instructors. They require clarity of purpose, understanding of time constraints in the classroom, and careful planning with team teachers, instructional librarians, anyone else who's going to be there. Digital projects can really allow us to expose students to inductive learning. As you can see with even just these scrolls, these pictures of scrolls, how far a lesson like this can expand a student's level of knowledge is impressive. Digital projects preserve rare materials. We did not have to unroll that 15-foot scroll again and again and again to do this. They also help to, especially in the case of Omeka, where you're building exhibits like Alexandra showed us, build a set of teaching materials that you can call on again and again and again, or that you can put in front of a successive generation of students and say, how would you improve this? What's wrong with this? What needs to be done? And I also think that digital projects can mitigate the dependency that instructors at the undergraduate level feel somewhat frustrated by when you have to be dealing only with English secondary sources. In a lot of cases, having digital surrogates of these primary sources sort of allow us to pull from students' skills in visual studies and ethnography, observing things rather than needing to read them, or having English translations readily available. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and pass it off to Elizabeth, who's going to talk about her projects in the classroom. Thank you.